First of all, good morning and welcome. I think that's a nice way to start the weekend. Today we'll take a trip to the world of Italian wine. Through this tasting, we will try to get to know the most important winemaking districts, and we will discover some indigenous varieties, which is one of the greatest wealth that we have when we talk about Italian wine. Would like to show you a video first off that we've prepared for this tasting to make you understand more about Italian wine. Thank you.
Italian wine is strongly linked with the different production territories, with the native vines, with our millenary history. Italian wine is culture, art, tradition, landscapes, cooperation, biodiversity. Italy is the first country in the world for wine production. The average production is 36 million hectoliters per year. There are 650,000 hectares of vineyards, of which about 110,000 hectares are in organic cultivation. 11 billion in production turnover, of which 6.3 from exports. 20 million hectoliters of wines exported to 130 countries. 15 billion total turnover. In the world, 1 bottle out of 5 of exported wine is made in Italy. Wine is the main ambassador of Made in Italy agri-food in the world. In Italy, there are 200,000 companies operating in the sector, of which 3,000 wine producers and over 1 billion employees. Italy ranks first in the world for the number of labels guaranteeing the quality and origin of a wine. 76 controlled and guaranteed designation of origin, and 332 controlled designation of origin have been recognized. 118 typical geographical indication, and 608 different registered wine grape varieties, of which over 550 are native. The history of Italian wine is the history of an indissoluble bond. The territory and the people who with their work take care of it. The history of Italian wine is a history of excellence.
So Italy is a relatively small country compared to other large winemaking countries. But if you take a look at the winemaking map of large European nations, or if we move overseas, we kind of find a patchy winemaking areas. But if you overlap the map of Italy and the map of Italian wine districts, we have exactly the same map. In all Italian regions, we make wine, and we have a great variety. So we can move from an alpine climate to a Mediterranean climate in a relatively short space with a wide wealth of indigenous varieties. Indigenous varieties that grow in specific locations that found their home in specific areas, and if moved somewhere else, that would give completely different results. And so we have the possibility of enjoying this puzzle of microclimates and soils with a large number of varieties, with a very broad diversity. So let's start our trip from Piedmont. And when we talk about Piedmont, we immediately think of the highly renowned areas like Langhe, the area of Barolo, the area of Barbaresco. But if we go over the Tanaro River, we find an equally interesting area, the Roero district, which is very different in terms of soils, because in Langhe we have a lot of sand, or at least much more sand. If we move to Roero, there is more clay and there is a large presence of marine fossils, because a few geological years ago, this area of Piedmont was covered by sea. So now it's an emerged land where we still have the remains from the sea. In 2014, Roero has become a UNESCO heritage site thanks to the beauty of its vineyards. And the winery that we have here is Giacomo Vico, a very old winery. They started making wine in the 1800s, and they are very proud producers from Roero. Roero has suffered a little bit the presence of Langhe next door, as they share the same variety, Nebbiolo, which is regarded as an elder brother. But actually, this is a different area with different expressions. So today we will taste Arnais and Nebbiolo from this winery, and we will see that there are many differences. If we taste a Nebbiolo from Langhe or a Nebbiolo from Roero, they are different. And the historical winery is all built underground, so digged into these rocks underground where wines are kept. And today they also built another section on the ground with the visitors room, but everything still happens in this very ancient underground cellar. And in 2010, they completely renovated the cellar and adopted some new cellar technologies. They thought of also bearing eco-sustainability in mind. Energy-wise, the company is independent thanks to this large area with solar panels that enables them to work almost autonomously, energy-wise. And the first variety we're about to taste is Arnais. Arnais is the white berry great wine or par excellence. Probably Arnais is a mutation, genetic mutation of a Nebbiolo, so it's like a white Nebbiolo. It's interesting to work with this variety because it's very tactile, very versatile. We have to control it in the vineyards, and above all, the enological project of Arnais, so the type of wine we want to make, has to start from the vineyard. Arnais allows us to make easy drinking wines that are just very well to oak, especially in large casks, giving us wines that have a great longevity. And one of the classical pairings that we have in Roero with Arnais, so with especially oak Arnais, is truffle. It isn't easy to pair truffle because it has a very aromatic profile, very intense aromatic profile, but in Arnais with a long longevity can be paired beautifully with this very intense food. So it has a good freshness. This is a variety that preserves acidity very well, and this acidity is going to support, to be the backbone that will give it a nice aging potential. And the wine we are about to taste is a Roero Arnais. single variety, and it's only kept in stainless steel. So both fermentation and aging happen in stainless steel. This is very straightforward arnase that cannot be kept for long, 2, 3, 4 years maximum, that wants to be drunk immediately. So let's enjoy the first glass, and let's take a look at the color. It has its typical straw yellow color, and we can notice some warmer highlights. So it's a warm highlight, straw yellow. It's not golden yellow, but we have a warm straw yellow. And now on the nose. The nose has a good intensity, but with no arrogance. It's a clean, elegant nose that is very subtle initially, then it opens up in the glass. And at first impact, we have this floral whiff. So the fruity notes come later on, like chamomile, dried, dehydrated chamomile, and then a bit of hawthorn that smoothens the nose. And then after, we have the typical minerality of this territory, which is a rocky minerality, very subtle, and all the flavors of this wine are whispered. And the interesting thing about this nose is that despite it's not very intense, we can truly enjoy all its nuances. And then we have notes of aromatic herbs, thyme, sage, and the finish is slightly spicy, very light, very mild. So these flavors intertwine, creating an interesting profile, which is the lighter version of this variety. Let's now take a sip. You can certainly perceive that anise on the palate confirms its freshness. And at first impact, we have acidity, a kind of citric component that makes us salivate. And then we have softness, so as to tame the freshness that initially was almost explosive. But then the glyceric component blends with this remarkable acidity, thus giving a nice sensory balance. You can tell this wine is still in the first stage, in the sense that it will stay some time in the bottle and find more balance. Then the finish is very, I mean, it matches very well the idea of the nose. The nose was delicate, mild, subtle, and also the finish. We have this range of flavors with not too much intensity, but great finesse and cleanliness. So it's a nice example of what anise can be in the short term. Of course, this is not the anise you can pair with a truffle. We have maybe pair it with milder dishes like a starter, fish starter, or a first course with fish, like fish sauce pasta, white fish sauce pasta. And this enables us to, so this finish is now releasing the chamomile, the floral notes, so a very subtle yet very pleasant freshness. So we will go back to Roero with a red wine. And now let's travel to the second wine district, to the second white wine. So we go down to Campania, down south. When you think of Campania, you immediately, so the first thing that comes to mind is the sea, these Mediterranean landscapes. But actually, Campania has like two faces, and this is more inland. We abandon the coast and we move over to the area of Benevento, so in the area of Sannio. which is an interesting area that, especially over the last 10 years, has made significant steps forward to find a nice expression. And this is an area with a large area under vine. So we are inland, as I said, a hilly area, and the climate is not at all a Mediterranean climate. Um, we have very cold winter and a fresh summer. And it's clear that a variety like Falangina can express itself very differently compared with Falangina from the coast. The most famous Falangina is from Campi Flegrei, which we've always paired with pasta with clams. But this is a completely different version. The winery is Fontana Vecchia. The Rillo family has been working there since the beginning of the 1900s. They have 18 hectares and a part is under vine. But they've left a lot of space for the forest so as to preserve the biodiversity of this area. This is a very wild area still. Already Virgil narrated about Sannio, saying that it was rich in water, fauna, flora, so extremely green area. And it's a land that is still very pristine. And the variety we're about to taste is Falangina. Falangina is a variety that has always been enjoyed very much, not only in Italy but also abroad, where it is very well known. Production is on the increase over the last few years as there is a growing demand for this variety also outside Italy. That's a very adaptable grapes and vine. So where you put it, it stays there, whether it's cold or warm or more limestone or more sand. So this is why in Campania it has always been a very important protagonist, as it always gives very good results, especially considering our viticulture, because until recently, until the 70s and 80s, wine in Italy, more than being a status symbol, more than being an expression of luxury, was a food. And farmers had their own vineyard and making their own wine, which was a sort of source of calories, not just pleasure. And of course, the spreading of Trebbiano or Falangina, that are very adaptable varieties, also meant to farmers to be able to have a safe harvest. And not all varieties lend to this kind of approach. And the particular characteristic of Falangina, it's true, wherever you put it, it works, but it can give different results as it interprets the territory, the soil, and the area and the air it breathes with very different results. Probably the word falangina comes from the word phalanx. The phalanx was the pole that was used to support this plant. And this is reminiscent of ancient viticulture because the style is very similar to Etruscan viticulture that was using the so-called vite maritata. The vine is like a liane, and so when wild it would grow extensively, and so in the past they had it cling around the trees. Then, when viticulture became a bit more well organized, they were using poles. They started using poles, where this liane was supported. And Falangina that we're about to taste is 100% Falangina, so single variety. This wine was fermented and aged only in still to preserve its freshness and its straightforward character. So we are in the area of Sannio, and this Falangina is not very good for aging. So this wine needs to be drank relatively short term. So let's take our second glass and see what it offers us. We have this golden color, which is the typical color of this wine. When Falangina is ripened, the grapes are very yellow, bright yellow. So even though there's no fermentation on the skins, we have the color, so the same color of the grapes in the wine. On the nose, as you can tell, it's different from the typical Ferrarangina from the seaside. Here we lose a bit the iodine flavors, and we find more sulfurous notes, more related to the inland soils in Campania. Certainly, it's fruity, and there is a nice ripened fruit, yellow peach, and also more tropical fruit. There is a touch of pineapple and some papaya too. So it's very aromatic and also a slightly herbaceous note. But it's a sweet, sweet green, like asparagus or a whiff of hay. And then there are floral notes of like yellow rose and a gentle, generous nose that is full and enveloping, despite it's simple, because the nose is extremely simple. Let's now taste it. So these flavors are opposite to those of Arnais. Arnais started with acidity, which was supported by softness. On the contrary, here it's the reverse. So the first off, we have softness. So the glyceric component is immediately perceivable when you take a sip. Then, when this softness seems to wane on the palate, then we get freshness coming in. And it's the reverse, and we have a nice balance. And you can tell this is a wine that already balanced, and it's about to reach its best expression. So that's why longevity is not very long, but very enjoyable. And it's, one of the bottles you buy and you can open immediately. Otherwise, you tend to buy bottles and then keep them in the cellar waiting for the right occasion. So buying these wines is certainly handy because you can have a nice glass of wine without having to resist the temptation for years on end. As to pairings, we can think of first courses with vegetables. And also, if we want to have fish, we have to use a very mild fish, such as stuffed squid, and the stuffing shouldn't be too rich or intense, or fresh cheese. Also, why not? It could work for this softness, this sweetness. So, two worlds, Arnais and Falangina, that are completely different. And let's see what happens when we move to the third white wine. And the winery we are talking about is still in Campania, called the Cala Fe. This is another area of Campania. We are in Irpinia, again, inland. When we talk about Irpinia, we talk about almost mountains. And this is a very interesting district. The DOCG we are going to taste is Greco di Tufo, and it's a very special area because the subsoil is made of tuffo. And there are different types of tuffs, some with yellow quartz inserts, others with more sandy inserts. But certainly the texture, the most important texture, is the mineral texture in these wines. And we might have perhaps a connection with someone from Calafe, is that right? Good morning. Can you hear me?
Eccomi, buongiorno.
Here they are. Good. So good morning. So today I'm not going to talk about wines. I would like to congratulate on you because you have presented our territory and our production very well.
Abbassare un pochino perché ancora si sente poco.
Perhaps you can raise the volume a little bit. I have a bit of a cold. So I was saying this morning I'm not going to talk about our winery or our wines because you are such a nice presenter and I'd like to congratulate on you because I'm listening to your presentations and they're great. I would like just to tell something about my story. Can you hear me?
La sentiamo un pochino bassa.
Yes, the volume is a little low. Well, I try to speak up a little bit. I hope you can hear me better. Can you hear me?
Più o meno voi sentite? Sì.
Yes, so well, very well. So I would like to explain you why this small winery was created, this small reality. I come from the world of books and culture, and where you talk about real things in life with some imagination. And the wines reflect the reality that we have created. So when going to the bookstore, I met people, and we would talk about the culture of wine. And so this is where my story started. So we created the winery in this area. At the center of the district of Greco di Tufo, where there are 8 municipalities. So we opened this winery where we make special wines. We started with Greco and we try to age Greco. And I have to say, with excellent results, because we have a 6 year uh, Greco from 2006 that truly enables us to understand the longevity, the aging potential of this variety. And that gives us a lot of flavors with very notes that are much more advanced than those that we find in younger Greco. And then I leave the floor to you so that you can say more about our wines. But I would like uh, to send you an aged wine so that you can tell me more about the longevity. So up to what point can we take it? Um,
Posso farle una domanda?
can I ask you a question?
Ho sentito diversi enologi
So I heard
dire
various
che qual
enologists
è
who said that
questo
Greco
longevity che
grapes
abbiamo?
are the
Come serve
white
adesso
wine
questa
dressed
cosa?
in red. Yes, it masks itself. Yes, true, because when I do tests on Greco di Tufo and Aglianico, which then is Taurasi, then the tests are the same. Same tannins, same acidity, same pH. And therefore, so why shouldn't this white wine should be aged like Aglianico? And this is where the challenge started. And we are working on that with the press. And it's very interesting to enjoy this wine because it can age very well. I'd like you to taste 2006, 7, and 8. They're excellent wines. And I'm talking about Greco di Tufo
Quindi
wine.
adesso degusteremo insieme
Okay,
due
now we're going
diverse
to taste your
testimonianze
Greco and your Aglianico,
che ci fanno
and we will
capire
have a chance to see
lavora
how
con
these
questa
white
proposta
berry
pazzesca.
grapes
Quindi
give this
insegniamoci il
powerful and
gusto, in
intense
modo che abbiamo
wine.
entrambi
Perhaps we can
delle
serve
visioni su
also
quella
the
che è.
red wine so that we can
Io
taste it
partirei
with the
dall'assaggio
winemaker.
del greco.
So let's taste the Greco. And actually, the color already speaks of a wine that is certainly golden yellow. And then on the nose,
qui si sente proprio un po'
we
la
can definitely
peculiarità
perceive the distinctive
dell'Egitto, ma se
characteristics
già
of
la
the
gente vede
territory.
un minerale,
Because
una
first off, we have a
mineralità
minerality. So the
spesso
first thing that stands
sottovalutato,
out
guarda
is this
che
sulfur,
praticamente
tough, when you
stessa
extinguish a match, you have this kind of sensation. Then we have fruity notes, but very different from Falangina fruit that was more was sweeter. This is more crunchy plum, a bit unripe, and also some spicy elements. There is a whiff of white pepper, some ginger, strong aromatic herbs like rosemary. Rosemary, which is something I would expect more from a red wine than a white wine. So it's a very earthy and let's say underground nose, less expansive than Falangina that we enjoyed earlier. But I think that this is understandable and why this wine is said to be red dressed in white. And then we have some floral notes that stand out, very delicate ones. And then we have this sensation of rock that broadens in the glass. And also balsamic note that initially was kind of whispered, but now it is becoming much more prevalent. So with menthol whiff. And paradoxically, I also find some leather, which is very unusual in white wines. But here there are some very special sensations. And feel free to add anything about the nose. I don't have much to add. This is a wine from 2019, so it's young. So it's the latest one we bottled, and it still has to mature, to age. That's the only thing I can add. So let's now take a sip. So the sip on the palate, sapidity is the key protagonist. So it's a savory wine with some saltiness. So this minerality on the nose becomes very tangible on the palate. It's as if you have salt crystals on the tongue. But at the same time, the body is full, nice structure, and also it's a very materic wine. And this finish is very lingering and very persistent and intense, with notes of aromatic herbs that we had in the nose, rosemary, especially in the finish, and the floral whiff. So it's very lingering, and it's still young, but it's already a nice snapshot of these terroir. So with time, we will have more flavors and aromas. And today, this wine speaks of tough, of rock, of the more underground soils in these vineyards that are so special. And you can see that, so you can definitely feel this weight. I mean, it doesn't slide away. We kind of have to keep it and chew it to truly enjoy all the nuances. So as you've said, certainly it is a young wine, yet with a great aging potential. And then the other wine that we'll taste with you is your Aglianico. So what do you want to tell us about this particular variety?
Dobbiamo parlare proprio dell'uva.
In this case, we have to talk about the grapes that are so special.
Nei primi di
We will
novembre,
harvest the beginning of
il
November.
vino
And
poi bisogna
these
continuare un po'
grapes
a fare attenzione
require a great deal of attention because since it's a late harvest variety, it could be exposed to any weather conditions. We are high up in the hills. As you've said, temperatures are very low. And in this moment, so we are almost in the midst of fall, the grapes tend to be affected. And so it takes a great deal of attention.
Normalmente quando
Um, Generally,
la fermentazione dei vini deve andare avanti per più di 10
fermentation
giorni perché
takes
hanno
10, 12 days because they have a high sugar
probabilmente
content,
vogliono tutti
these grapes.
essere
Um,
al largo in
and
poco tempo prima
they are
di
ready to be kept in the
allo
casks
stato
and
breve se
age.
vogliamo sia
And the alcohol content is still pretty high. And where do you age your wine? Steel, oak?
quello che non fa legna, facciamo
No, no oak. So it's just a stainless steel.
quello che poi porta a Taurasi
Whereas for Taurasi, we don't have a barriques, but we have casks like a tonneau because I don't. There's too much oak in small barriques, and we don't want our Taurasi to have too much oak, but just take all what oak can give to wine, and then take some tannins from the casks. Of course, Taurasi is a wine that requires a great deal of patience, and these large casks would soften these sensations without covering the drive, the strength of Aglianico. And interesting to taste an Aglianico kept only in stainless steel. We know that Aglianico has a nice sugar profile that gives also to interesting alcohol content, also tannins and acidity. Like all the great varieties, think of Sangiovese or Nebbiolo, have these characteristics. So tannins and acidity, and actually these are the long life elixirs of wine. And here I find the typical color of Aglianico from this area. So this ruby red with these purple highlights, very bright, and this lightness makes us already expect a nice profile, aromatic profile. So the nature of this Aglianico from Irpinia stands out because in Greco we had minerality from tough. Here minerality gets darker. And also the mineral component is prevalent on the nose, but it's much more slate or darker with some smoky notes. And the smoky notes have nothing to do with the toasted notes of wood and of oak, but this comes from the variety. So it's from its olfactory profile. Then we have red fruits, still crunchy, like raspberry, cherry, touch of plum, but not over ripened, still to chew. Then spices. That's another typical part of the typical profile, like some cardamom, some black pepper, and also whiff of licorice, some tobacco, some leather. So the node is the nose of Aglianico without the austerity of Taurasi, that is, they aged much longer. So I think that aging in steel has truly given us a picture, an overview of the varietal notes of this wine, thus expressing its true nature without dampening these sensations. So on the palate, it is rich, yet slender at the same time. Of course, tannins are present and acidity absolutely very perceptible, and that's more than welcome. This is where we find the authenticity of this grape in this relationship between acidity and tannins, freshness and tannins. And at the same time, it's easy to drink. So we perceived these crunchy red fruits on the nose, and on the palate, they give it some immediacy, some easy drinking nature. And so we have again some notes of slate, some dark mineral notes, and most of all, this smoky note that is typical of Aglianico. Do you want to add anything about this wine?
Da aggiungere queste conferma innanzitutto
This
il
is
periodo dopo un anno di imbottigliamento
a wine that,
risultato che deve lasciare il prodino.
I
Cos'è
mean,
che
you
aggiunge
shouldn't drink
all'interno
it
ovviamente?
after 1 year. This is
Il
2019,
greco è più giovane
and it's even younger
del greco perché
than the Greco.
di solito si
Because
sta
it
tanto
needs to
più
spend a long time in the bottle. So ideally, you should drink it after 3 years in bottle, and you can keep it for years on end with no problems. So with no faults
anche
in
nella
the bottle.
composizione che noi usiamo ben pochi prodotti agricoli.
And actually, we don't
Stiamo
use
parlando di prodotti
many at
relativi
all chemical
concentrati,
substances or to preserve wines. And so all the
lavoro
work we do is just the ordinary things. And when you open a bottle of this Aglianico for dinner, what do you pair it with?
vanno mangiate tranquillamente con un po' di carne, senza nessun
Meat,
problema, anche
certainly,
sulla
but
pasta,
also
che
pasta.
magari per i fatti
And
poco, però sulle carni
maybe
normali usiamo
meat and cheeses are
Poi
ideal for
serviamo
this wine.
tipi
And
di
then
piatti
the
generosi,
older they are,
carni
the
grigliate,
more maybe roasted meat
molto
or
comune.
grilled meat.
Ok, in sala c'è qualche domanda per
Is there
Carla?
any question for the Calafé winery here?
Io vi ringrazio moltissimo di
No,
averci
then
concesso
thank you
questo
very
spazio
much for the
e
time you devoted to
ovviamente di
us. It was a
fare
great
questa
pleasure
chiacchierata
to
insieme.
taste your wines with
Sicuramente
you.
questo wine
So enjoy your work and you enjoy your harvest. Yes, we'll harvest Greco from next week on.
buona giornata, arrivederci.
So all the best. Thank you. Same to you.
Bene, dopo questa passeggiata
So after this trip to Campania,
fattoria di vini
let's
che
go back
scusate che
to our wines.
collegamento, ero pronta, eccoci qua. Ritorniamo in Piemonte,
And
ritorniamo
so
nel
let's go
comune
back
di
to
Roero,
Piedmont in
ritorniamo in
Roero.
un'azienda
So let's go
di
back with
la
Giacomo
Arnesi,
Vico.
appunto la
We
grande
tasted the
degustazione
Arnais at the
e
beginning of
ora
our
invece
tasting,
andiamo
and
ad
now we will
assaggiare
be
il
tasting
Nebbiolo.
their Nebbiolo.
Quando si parla di
When we
Nebbiolo
talk
si
about
parla
Nebbiolo,
di
we
Piemonte
talk about Piedmont
fondamentalmente, quindi parliamo
essentially.
di Vigno, si parla di
Despite these
Chiavenna
varieties also in the Aosta Valley, in Valtellina, where it's called the Chiavenasca, but the most well-known Nebbiolo is from Piedmont. This is a very special variety. Probably the name, well, it's said it comes from the word fog, nebbia, because it's a late ripening wine where it blossoms very early and ripens very late. So it has a long cycle, life cycle. So it's a variety that always keeps you worried. For instance, a year like this, in April, we had a lot of frost, and recently, a few weeks ago, we had some cold weather and hailstorms. So working with Nebbiolo means you lose part of your harvest because of this long vegetative cycle. It's a complicated variety. It's like the prince of Piedmontese varieties that needs it needs a fresh climate but not too cold. And it has to stay in between 300 and 400 meters of altitude. It requires wind because it has a very close bunch And if there was no wind, the humidity would be kept inside the grape, and it would develop molds. Then it requires steep slopes, it requires limestone and sand, so much so that in Langhe and Roero it requires a lot of light, not of warmth, but light. And so on the hills of Roero and Langhe, the better exposures are planted with this variety. Barbera, Dolcetto are more adaptable, whereas Nebbiolo does need to be treated, as we say in Italian, with gloves, so with a great deal of attention. So the Nebbiolo that we are tasting is from the area of Roero. So we are talking about this territory, this terroir that is somewhat different from Langhe. So this is vinified in red under controlled temperature and two delistage steps. So the wine is mixed so that yeasts can yield new flavors. Then it's aged 6 months in large casks, so very traditional approach. That is a large cask, not the barrique, small one. And then it's kept for 8 months in the bottle. And the color is completely different from Aglianico, but this is the color of Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo is a variety that has very special pigments, a lot of malvinins and cyanins, which are pigments that find it hard to get fixed during fermentation. And so during fermentation, the color of Nebbiolo faints immediately. And so we have this garnet red already when it's young, and this very elegant transparency. So as you can see, it's not dense. It has this very delicate, elegant color. So, and on the nose, you can excited about that. And this is actually the scent of the undergrowth brush, starting from wild berries, raspberries, blueberries.
Sentite che sensazioni
So
autunnali esprime al naso,
we have
molto
these,
raffinante, di eleganza, di piacevolezza, davvero affascinante.
and therefore it is very pleasant and very fast. These citrusy flavors, almost bergamot and or blood orange. It's a delicate, and so the floral notes, and then here comes an explosion. Tannins, but please focus on the quality of these tannins. There's a lot of and dehydrates, and then it melts. So it's not too long, lingering with these continuous notes of underbrush that gives you a postcard, sends you a postcard from the area where it comes from. And so this is a nice. Today we taste a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, and the DOCG Montepulciano d'Abruzzo covers the entire region. Late 80s, early 90s, Abruzzo had this reputation for showing the potential of Montepulciano and Trebbiano d'Abruzzo. How? Well, mainly reduced, so with the lower yields and a more rational. The Abruzzo have a new personality, and they discovered how well they are also in the express these identity and aging potential. And the winery Scalamonti, we are in Loreto Abruzino, beautiful area to visit. So it's an area which is surrounded by the sea and the mountains. And therefore, these vineyards have this kind of natural air conditioning with mountain winds descending towards the sea and the sea breeze climbing up from the sea. and a lot of light, also because the light reflects on the sea surface and increases luminosity, and therefore it makes it easier for these grapes to ripen. The winter is not too cold. And the summers are not are pretty fresh. And Calamonti was founded in 2001. Do we have a connection with Talamonti? No, not yet. So, in any case, 2001, 45 hectares of land, some for wine and some for extra virgin olive oil. This is an extremely oil-worthy area. And the story of this vineyard is based on a love affair of an American and person from Abruzzo, and they decided to join forces. And they started immediately to work on micro vinifications, and therefore like 50, 100 to 100 liters, so that means a cask virtually, to experiment each individual plot in the vineyard to understand exactly the relationship between the vineyard, the variety, and the wine. And this enabled them to rationalize a lot the work in the vineyard and then to work in the cellar with a great approach, detailed approach. We're going to taste Montepulciano, which is scattered all over central Italy. Certainly, Abruzzo is the most important area. It is often confused with Nobile di Montepulciano, but it has nothing to do with that because that's a Sangiovese grapes. This is a variety that again, it is a late ripening variety, but actually it doesn't blossom too early, and therefore the vegetative cycle is not as long as for Nebbiolo. But it's a very generous variety. So if you let it go, don't tame it, it would produce. And this is one of the first problems. So you have to tame Montepulciano because it becomes interesting if you have low yields. And so considering that there was a kind of farmers' culture that was more focused on quantity, sorry, it took quite a while to change their mind. So high sugar content, high alcohol, tannins that are never overpowering, always soft. And it's no coincidence that Montepulciano is often used in blends in many regions. For instance, Puglia historically used with Nero di Troia that has a very strong tannins, or a blend with Sangiovese. So Montepulciano manages to calm down these more aggressive varieties, more restless varieties, thanks to its calm. And then we have Cerasolo d'Abruzzo, which is for rosé. And it has a good concentration thanks to this presence of polyphenols in the Montepulciano grapes. And the wine we're about to taste is Montepulciano d'Abruzzo 100% called Tre Salti, 14 days of alcoholic fermentation. Malolactic fermentation is in oak, and then it's aged for 12 months in barrique and 12 months in the bottle to just integrate this oak sensation. Typical color, dark, compact, black, almost purplish. And on the nose, it's very generous nose. So we moved from Aglianico, that with these black mineral sensations, then Barolo underbrush, dark, and here that's very welcoming. So at first impact, we have these fruity notes, full fruity note, like a black cherry, like the black cherry under alcohol, and cherry and blackberry jam. And then we have spices like cinnamon, like clove, and then nutmeg, and nice balsamic note, nice balsamic notes, that is favored by the barrique. So these balsamic notes smell like eucalyptus, and then chocolate, coffee, sweet tobacco, so like dried flowers, a potpourri of dried flowers, licorice, but not a root, more a candy, a licorice, chewy candy. So it's a welcoming nose in all its nuances, gentle, generous. Let's take a sip.
Vi conferma bocca come un sorso pieno,
So the
ricco,
palate is rich and full, and the tannins of a multiple channel is completely different from Aglianico, from Nebbiolo. It's a soft tannins, almost sweet tannins. So nice freshness, not overpowering, so very enveloping and soft. And yet again, this is a wine that certainly requires the bottle aging. This is 2017, by the way, but you can tell from the bite, from the structure, the body, that it can age absolutely very well for a long time. Talamonti also makes Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, and a few days ago, we tasted the 2011 Trebbiano d'Abruzzo, which was very alive and kicking. So they work very well on wines with a good aging potential. So let's continue, and we move to La Fortezza in the area of Benevento. And we have the producer who is here, and so it's great that we have her here that she can tell us more about it. Thank you. I've seen that here there is a lot of wine. There are a lot of wines from Campania, and I'm very happy because actually we have worked much better, and we have we believe seriously in this product, and we are working better and believe more in what we do, and therefore we have more wineries who do not only make wine for themselves, but to sell these great wines from Campania. We are from Sannio, in the area. We are relatively young. We started 11 years ago, and the winery was founded by our owner. He has a wealth of vineyards. So you can see these hills all covered with vineyards and olive groves, because all the farmers had the vineyards to make their own wine, and the owner remembers that this was true when he was little, and especially he always remembers about the harvest time. And so some years ago, he decided to work in the wine business, to bring in Italy and across the world the beauty of this territory through this product that then you can find on your table. In Campania, we have two products. They are protagonists: Falanghina for Bianco and Aglianico for Red. And we also make a Piedi Rosso, that is another red berry grape, then a Riserva for Aglianico, and for whites also Greco and Falanghina, in addition to the Falanghina Spumante. because we deeply believe in the power of these varieties, and only by by using indigenous varieties and therefore making the most of our soils, we can have great results in the bottle. Our vineyards are at 400 meters above sea level on the espalier of the Taburno mount, very well ventilated, very well exposed under the sun. And all these factors enable us to avoid using too much pesticides, because we don't need that, because this temperature difference between daytime and nighttime, because daytime it's relatively warm in summer and winter, and at night it's pretty cold. And therefore we don't need too many treatments. And Aglianico, as my colleague said, Aglianico doesn't ripen easily, immediately. And actually, we haven't started yet harvesting our Aglianico. We just harvested the Sfumante base, not even Falanghina Taburno. And we will do that at the beginning of November with all the challenges to achieve great results. Thank you. Representative of this special designation. So we have, so that there is a balanced oak, but not too overpowering. Vivid color of Aglianico. The nose is different. It's different from other Aglianico. And we have these fruity notes, less ripen. So it's a darker and deeper keynote component, gentian root, ginseng root, and slate and fern, then black floral component. We have slightly withered red, not coffee, but it's the coffee powder and leather too. The nose is very deep and also tells that it takes time for what you say. And also the use of oak is very important and is very meticulous in to be too excessive, too overpowering, because it will like spoil the nature of this variety. So let's taste it. It's powerful, rich, powerful, well structured, without any doubt. And please notice the elegance of these tannins. And so the oak aging is so barrique and tonneau aging makes these tannins present yet impalpable. So this wine is mainly persistent. So persistency, these lingering notes are very straightforward. So little by little, the wine opens up on the palate. And initially, we perceive the smoky and toasty notes, and then these balsamic notes that makes the sip lighter. So as to persistence, it takes time and patience, because it needs time to open up and to give you a different depth. And so this is for the lunch on Sundays with lasagna with wild boar sauce, or why not barbecue meat. So we have nice structure that supports various meat dishes. I know I have 3 minutes. I will hurry up, don't worry. So we can have great fun, but also a stew and a more succulent dish. And remember that that this is something that we drink every day, and also we have pretty heavy dishes. Thank you, thank you very much.
Chiudiamo in
So let's
dolcezza
close
invece
with some
andiamo
sweetness
in
because we
Friuli,
travel over
questo
to
territorio da
Friuli
Friuli
in this very
Allora, io
lucky
voglio iniziare
wine
così.
district. We are in
Quali
the eastern hills
caratteristiche
of uh, Friuli, and it's hard to make bad wine in this area because this area is protected from the cold from the north by the Alps. But we have the sea breeze that comes from the sea. And so with perfect southwest and southeast exposures, so perfect drainage. And so vineyards are fundamental, as have always been there, because this is a very wine-worthy area. And we are tasting Falcon, that is a winery that is truly wine-worthy for wine production in this area. We have 8 hectares all in all, so a relatively small space. So it's a nice kind of garden. And they started off from the ancient varieties and they replanted the new vineyards for new production. And today we are going to taste Picolit. Picolit is a very particular variety, and it's was famous across Europe already from the 17th century. And one of the great promoters was Count Paolo Sprini, who, in the midst of the 1700s, decided to bet on the potential of this wine and started to ship over these wines to all European courts. He was a teetotaler, but he liked to work in the vineyard, and he kept saying about Titolit, don't ask never a lady to taste it because she will tell you yes. So this is a wine that makes you surrender. Why is Piccolo so special? Well, actually, its magic comes from a bad problem, which is the flowers. Most of them are sterile, and therefore they will not make a berry. So it's a very loose bunch, few berries. And of course, the plant doesn't know, and therefore it sends energy to nourish an entire plant and all the flowers, but actually goes only to a few berries, and therefore they are very, very much concentrated. And so the wine is Picolit, 100% hand harvested, dried for 45 days. As to aging, it depends on the years. Sometimes only still, sometimes they use large casks, small barriques. So every year it depends on the results. And so on the in the glass we have this amber yellow, this precious stone, and if we smell the nose, the nose is very enveloping. So we have dehydrated apricots, dehydrated ginger. The fruit is dry, the fruit is sweet, absolutely, and you get these spicy sensation, very interesting. And there is a whiff of saffron, of curry, curry, and then you have more malted notes. Do you remember of the Alpenliebe candy? Yes, that's the idea. The caramel too, and aromatic herbs, dried aromatic herbs. So the nose is sweet without being cloying. And on the palate it's creamy, velvety, and it slides on the palate with a lot of strong glyceric component, but it's not overpowering because we have a lot of acidity to balance. So salivation keeps moving. We have these malted notes, these spicy notes that are super interesting, very, very lingering. finish. We done a note of toasted almond that cleans the palate perfectly. So it's a very dangerous wine. So if you put a little butter, a little fresh on your table, you'll finish it without even realizing it. So it's drank with dessert in cantuccio or a crostata, and and also with a blue cheese, gorgonzola, or a blue cheese, or foie gras, because this could be a very lucky combination. I have a big timeout. Time is over, so I'm late today. Thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure to share this tasting with you. Have a nice day. Have a nice weekend, and all the best. Thank you. And of course, if we have questions, we are here.
Dobbiamo fare il saluto da vicino, dall'altra parte. Ci sono un po' di domande. Perfetto.
So there are a few questions. Are there importers in China? And wine number 3. Ossidative.
Lei non presentava caratteristiche di ossidazione.
We didn't have any oxidative notes. Maybe the bottle shipped over to China might have some problem, but I didn't have any oxidative sensation.
Collegamento con la Cina nel frattempo che hanno degustato i nostri stessi vini ovviamente, quindi
They went over a long distance.
possiamo avere due bottiglie iniziali con vino diverse, quindi può assolutamente succedere. E solo per rispondere alla domanda per quanto
Just
riguarda
to
il
answer, since I'm the only one, as far as China, we don't have an importer. We have a private label. And so the market is free, and so we can work definitely with some importers. So for La Fortezza,
portatore per la Cina che
there can be possibilities for an importer in China.
Perfetto, signori, buona giornata.
Very well. Thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Bye bye.